Name a better partner in crime for an action-packed weekend than the Chevy Colorado. Go ahead, I'll wait. But seriously though, it's got just about everything you could ask for. There's more than enough room inside to fit you and a few of your friends, and the box is big enough to fit your bikes in the back to get up to the top of the hill in a hurry. But the real question is, can it make it back down to the bottom before the bikes do? To find out, I set out in search of a spot that works for both in the 2020 Chevrolet Colorado Z71. On top of looking the part thanks to this screaming orange paint job, this one is decked out with some extra skid plates and rocker guards and comes with meaty 31-inch Goodyear Duratrac tires, perfect for slinging some stone on the access roads that lead up and down these hills. As much as I love full-size trucks, they're probably overkill for a lot of people. And if this is the extent of the truck stuff you've got planned, a midsize like the Colorado is totally fine. Yes, it is a little bit cramped on the inside, and you'll notice it compared to something bigger like the Silverado, but there's still more than enough room in here to pick up a few of your friends for a weekend of adventure, and that's kind of what I've got planned for today. Obviously, the key here is that I'm driving the crew cab model, and it's the one with the short box, which has its pros and its cons. One pro is that there is enough room in the bed to fit some bikes in the back without it being too big. The thing I like about mid-size trucks the most is that they're very manageable. Whether you're weaving through trees or traffic, there's not too much truck to have to keep an eye on. You won't feel that nervousness of a full-size truck in the city or out on a tight trail. But of course the drawback is that if you want to do anything like toss a dirt bike in the back, you'll definitely want to pick the long box. But it does add about 12 inches overall to the length of the Colorado, so that's something to keep in mind if you're looking at a truck like this, because that's a pretty significant difference. But even if you buy one with the long box, it's still going to be really manageable, and that's kind of the key to a mid-size truck compared to a full-size one. It's just a little bit easier to operate no matter what you plan to do with it. So let's cover some fundamentals. You can get 3 different engines under the hood of the Colorado, including a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder or a 2.8-liter turbo diesel. Now that engine is probably the one I would pick if I were in the market for a truck like this, but the tester I'm driving has a 3.6-liter V6 engine under the hood. This thing cranks out 308 horsepower to go along with 275 pound-feet of torque. It's not going to jump off the page, but it is more than enough to help you get out of a jam. And the same thing goes with the drive configuration. Now you can get the Colorado in a rear-wheel drive setup, but if you plan to get yourself in any sort of sticky situation that needs some extra traction, go ahead and jump straight to a 4x4 like this one. There isn't too much to complain about out here on the pavement, though I will point out that the chunky tires that come with this Trail Runner package are very noisy. Seriously, they're like winter tires on steroids, and no matter what I do to try to drown them out, it's just that constant droning that is driving me absolutely crazy. But again, those tires do come in handy when you're out on a light trail like we're going to get to in a little bit. Now, my perspective has been impacted just a little bit by the fact that I spent last week in a GMC Sierra, so I got used to all that extra shoulder room. But even the Chevy Blazer I drove a few weeks ago has more shoulder room in this thing, and you really notice it when you're up front, especially because this center console is much more narrow, so you're a lot closer to the person in the passenger seat. When you're cruising around by yourself, it's not too bad, but as soon as you have someone beside you, you definitely notice just how narrow it is in here. Though I will point out there's a good amount of headroom. Now, this one doesn't have a sunroof, but if you compare this to something like the Toyota Tacoma, there's a lot more room up top. The other thing to point out about the way it drives is that it's still a truck, so it's got some of that rigidity that gives it a seesaw effect over bumps, and it's not the most comfortable vehicle on the road. So if you plan to use this as your daily driver, take note, especially if you're coming from something like a car. It's just a bit of an old school truck ride quality. Again, if you're coming from a truck into this, you're not going to have a problem with it, but if you're transitioning to something that's a little bit smoother, you will notice just how rigid and jarring bumps in the road can be. The nicest part about the way the Colorado drives is this handling, because it is absolutely dialed. It's nice and light at low parking lot speeds, which again makes it very manageable and maneuverable. But when you're out on the road, it's nice and firm, and it's almost got the handling qualities of a car. There is a little bit of a dead spot on center, but honestly I think that has more to do with these squishy tires than the steering rack itself, and I'm really surprised with just how smooth and firm this steering is. The other thing about this steering setup that I like is that if you compare it to something like the Jeep Gladiator that you're constantly fighting with to keep it moving in a straight line, this one is very easy to keep it tracking, and it just makes it that much easier to drive. It's one less thing to worry about, so you can focus on what's around you. Ultimately, how I describe the Colorado is that it rides like a truck and it handles like the car, which is all you could ever ask for in a mid-size truck like this. I've rambled on about this truck for long enough, and it's time to put it to the test. But first, we need a challenger. Meet Tyler Maxwell. When adventure calls, this man answers, though he prefers to text. If I used words like gnarly, radical, and wicked awesome, I'd use them all to describe Tyler. In short, he's the perfect guy for the job. Plus, he agreed to do it all for free. The rules are simple. I'm gonna drop Tyler off at the top of the hill, and he's gonna bomb down that trail as fast as he can. I'm gonna stick to the road, and whoever gets to the bottom first wins. Okay, so there's no sport mode in this thing, but there is a bit of a secret weapon, and that's tow haul mode. Basically what it does is it stretches out the ratios of this 8-speed automatic transmission to keep you in the meaty part of the power band. The Colorado isn't especially quick, but this V6 does give you some progressive power, and that really helps in a situation like this. I'm also not sawing at the wheel too much because of this great steering setup, and I have a really good sense of which direction the tires are pointed. It's actually really nimble for a truck. It's kind of surprising even for a mid-size pickup just how nimble and agile this thing is. Now again, this V6 doesn't have a ton of power, but there is enough to work with, and it's got a pretty good soundtrack as well. Tyler's definitely got a bit of an advantage because he's riding more of a direct line, but I would argue that I'm having just a bit more fun out here. In the end, it was close, but Tyler emerged victorious. Gracious in defeat, I offered him a ride back to the top. Okay, so back to the basics about this truck. The interior definitely feels a generation old in terms of the controls and switchgear. If you look at some of these toggle buttons and these chunky rubberized knobs, they're just kind of poorly executed, and I'm not so crazy about the way they look or feel. I understand what GM was trying to do when they designed it, but I definitely think it misses the mark. The other thing is this gear selector feels really flimsy, and I'm a firm believer that a truck should have a column shifter. Plus, it gives you a little bit more room on the center console for your stuff, which would definitely come in handy in such a tight cabin. Again, all these rubberized knobs you have in here just feel a little bit cheesy and hokey, but on the flip side, at least you don't have a bunch of tiny little buttons like you do in the Silverado. And that's kind of the thing in here. At least everything is very big and easy to read. When you glance down at these buttons, you know exactly what they do, so you don't have to go hunting for them when you're out on the road. The other thing about this cabin is that it's got the newest version of GM's Infotainment software, and it is pretty much perfect. I'd put it up there with FCA and Hyundai in terms of ease of use as well as responsiveness. This touchscreen is very responsive. You can swipe, you can tap, and it responds instantaneously. But the other nice thing is that it's very bright and crisp, which makes it easy to read. There's also a built-in Wi-Fi hotspot and Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so you can stay connected on the go. I really dig using this infotainment system, and I think more automakers need to take a page out of this playbook. The rest of the cabin looks and feels about 40,000 bucks worth. Translation, not exactly premium, and I'm not just talking about these fabric and leatherette seats, but just the way the whole thing is slapped together doesn't really feel all that nice. But then again, you get what you pay for, and you're probably not going to be too upset when you track a bunch of dirt or mud inside of this thing. These seats are pretty thin, so they do get uncomfortable over time, but my biggest beef with this cabin is that there's no storage space at all. This console bin isn't very big, and there's not much in terms of cubbies on the console. These door pockets aren't very roomy either, and the glove box is pretty tight, so there's not a whole lot of room for your stuff, especially if you've got people in the back seat. And then of course there's that common pickup truck complaint that there's no place to keep your stuff warm and dry because you've got that open bed on the back. But if you've got a pickup truck in mind, this one is a pretty good option. And again, you're getting what you pay for. The cabin isn't the only way the Colorado's showing its age, because you can barely get any advanced safety features in this thing. First of all, no adaptive cruise control is offered at all. Then there's no lane keep assist, no forward automatic emergency braking, there's not even blind spot monitoring. Instead, all you can get are a couple of warning systems for lane departure or forward collisions, but again, it doesn't do anything automatically. And you can get some of that stuff in some competitors, so it doesn't make the most compelling case for safety. Otherwise, I'd describe this as a truck for someone who doesn't really need one, but they want one. But it's not too bad at being a truck either, and you can tow about 7,000 pounds behind this one, or throw about 1,500 pounds worth of stuff in the bed, which is pretty good for a mid-size truck. That means you can pull a small boat or a trailer without any issues. Anything more than that, you will want to step up to a bigger truck, but not many people need to tow more than 7,000 pounds anyways. It's not a bad bargain either. A crew cab like this one with four-wheel drive, that V6 engine under the hood, and the Z71 package has a sticker price of about 41 grand, and that's before any incentives are applied. Even with the extras my tester has, like this paint job, the spray and bed liner, the tow package, and a few others, it's only priced at about 48 grand before tax, which isn't bad at all. And again, if you can get yourself some incentives on top of that, it looks like a pretty good buy. To recap, I like the size of the Colorado, how easy it is to drive, and how perfect it is as a lifestyle vehicle. I don't like the outdated controls, the cramped cabin, or the lack of storage inside. In the end, like so many other mid-size trucks, the Chevy Colorado is a lifestyle vehicle more than anything else, but it's a pretty damn good one. It comes up a little short in the cabin and the kind of technology you can get, but it hits back with a reasonable price without sacrificing too much usability. I get why people love pickup trucks, but before you pick a full-size one, it might be worth seeing if the Colorado will do the trick instead. Man, you look like you could use a pick-me-up. Can I interest you in a glass of the good stuff? More for me. And don't forget to subscribe!